9 months, the time it takes for a life to form in the womb. In Egypt of 1400 before Christ, 9 months destroyed the most powerful civilization on earth. Water turned to blood. Animals died by the millions. Darkness swallowed the sun for 3 days, and on the last night, every Egyptian house buried a son. Before the plagues began, Egypt controlled the known world. The civilization had 3,000 years of uninterrupted history. Monumental pyramids proved its dominion over stone and time. The Great Pyramid of Khufu, built 1,000 years before the plagues, still dominated the horizon. At 146 meters high, more than 2,300,000 limestone blocks, each weighing 2.5 tons, stacked with mathematical precision. It was the tallest structure on the planet and would remain so for another 3,700 years. The Nile fed 30 million people through an irrigation system that transformed desert into granary. The river had 6,650 kilometers of total length, but the part that crossed Egyptian territory from the first cataract to the delta measured 1,200 kilometers. Its annual floods deposited black silt, rich in nutrients that guaranteed 3 harvests per year. Wheat, barley, flax, papyrus, everything grew in abundance. Thebes, the religious capital, housed 500,000 inhabitants. The Temple of Karnak occupied 100 hectares. 134 giant columns supported the hypostyle hall, each 21 meters high. Memphis, the administrative city to the north, had another 300,000 residents. Pharaoh's palace in Memphis covered 12 hectares, surrounded by walls 10 meters thick. Pharaoh was considered the son of Ra, the sun god. When he spoke, nations obeyed. When he commanded, armies marched. The Egyptian economy was the most sophisticated in the ancient world. Scribes recorded every transaction on papyrus. Merchants exchanged Nubian gold, African ivory, Lebanese cedar, Cypriot copper, tin from distant Anatolia. Egyptian ships dominated the eastern Mediterranean. Caravans crossed the desert to Mesopotamia. Pharaoh's treasury accumulated wealth from 50 tributary nations. But there was a problem growing on the empire's periphery. Hebrew slaves, descendants of 70 people who arrived during the famine 430 years before, now numbered more than 600,000 adult men, counting women and children, easily 2 million souls. A population equivalent to Memphis and Thebes combined, but without rights, without property, without freedom. Pharaoh forced them to make mud bricks in the furnaces of the storage cities. Pithom and Ramesses were monumental construction sites where Hebrews mixed mud with straw, molded bricks, dried them in the sun, baked them in ovens that reached 800 degrees. They worked 16 hours a day under braided leather whips. The daily quota was 200 bricks per man. If someone produced less, the overseer applied 20 lashes to the back. If production fell collectively, they executed a random worker as an example. When the Hebrew population continued growing despite slave labor, Pharaoh issued a genocidal decree. Every newborn Hebrew boy should be drowned in the Nile. Egyptian midwives received orders to kill babies at birth. When they disobeyed out of fear of God, soldiers invaded homes searching for children. For years, the Nile served as a tomb for thousands of Hebrew babies. Then Moses appeared, a Hebrew raised in the palace who had fled 80 years before after killing an Egyptian overseer who was beating a slave. He spent 40 years in the Midian desert, married Zipporah, daughter of a priest, worked as a shepherd. At 80 years old, on an ordinary morning while tending sheep on Mount Horeb, he saw a burning bush that was not consumed. He approached, and God spoke from the midst of the fire, commissioning him to return to Egypt and demand Israel's liberation. Moses returned at 80 years of age, holding only a staff of acacia wood, accompanied by his brother Aaron, who was 83 years old. Together they crossed the Sinai desert, crossed the Egyptian border guarded by military fortresses, entered Memphis, and presented themselves in the throne room. Guards laughed at seeing two old men demanding audience with Pharaoh. But Moses knew palace protocols. He had been raised there. He knew how to reach the throne. They entered the hall covered in gold, flanked by polished red granite columns. Pharaoh sat on the elevated throne, wearing the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt, holding the scepter and the flail, symbols of absolute power. Priests of Ra, Amun, and Ptah surrounded the throne. Nobles dressed in finely pleated linen observed with curiosity. Moses gave the ultimatum. "Thus says the Lord God of Israel, let my people go, that they may hold a feast to me in the wilderness." Pharaoh laughed. "Who is the Lord, that I should obey his voice? To let Israel go? I do not know the Lord, nor will I let Israel go." That laugh cost 9 months of nightmare. That same afternoon, Pharaoh increased the oppression. He ordered the Hebrews to make the same quota of bricks, but now without receiving straw. They would have to find straw themselves in the fields and still produce 200 bricks daily. The revolt among the Hebrews exploded. Hebrew officers confronted Moses. "The Lord look upon you and judge, because you have made us abhorrent in the sight of Pharaoh." But God did not retreat. The first plague happened on an ordinary morning, 7 days after the meeting in the palace. Pharaoh had daily religious routine. At dawn, he walked to the bank of the Nile to make offerings to Hapi, god of the river. He believed his prayers guaranteed the annual floods that fed Egypt. It was public ceremony. Priests, nobles, and hundreds of citizens accompanied. Moses and Aaron were waiting on the bank. Moses repeated the command, "Let my people go." Pharaoh refused again. Then Moses warned, "By this you shall know that I am the Lord. Behold, I will strike the waters that are in the river with the staff that is in my hand, and they shall be turned to blood." Aaron stretched out the staff over the Nile, and all the water turned to blood in front of hundreds of witnesses. It was not metaphor. Exodus chapter 7 verse 21 leaves specific details. "And the fish that were in the river died, the river stank, and the Egyptians could not drink the water of the river. And there was blood throughout all the land of Egypt." Calculate the magnitude. The Nile has 9 meters of average depth. Width varies between 200 and 800 meters along the Egyptian route. 1,200 kilometers of extension crossing pharaonic territory. Total volume, approximately 450 billion liters. All that volume transformed instantaneously from crystalline water to thick, red, viscous blood. All the fish died. Tilapia, Nile catfish, Nile perch, species that sustained the feeding of millions. 7 million tons of fish rotting simultaneously under 40-degree sun. The smell spread throughout the territory. There was no way to escape. Opening the window in the morning meant smelling the stench of rotten flesh mixed with the metallic smell of blood. Pharaoh's magicians, called Janus and Jambres, managed to replicate the phenomenon on a small scale. They took water from wells, used incantations and sorcery, transformed it to blood before the court. Pharaoh felt justified. "My magicians also do this. Therefore it is not the power of any god. It is a trick." But here was the critical difference. The magicians replicated but did not reverse. They managed to create more blood but could not return the water. Exodus 7 verse 23 records, "And Pharaoh turned and went into his house. Neither did he set his heart to this also." For 7 days, 30 million Egyptians had no drinking water. The cisterns were empty because they depended on the Nile's annual flood. Shallow wells pulled water from the water table connected to the river. Also blood. Egyptians dug deep wells around the banks, trying to find water filtering through layers of sand and rock. Some got murky water, tasting of earth but drinkable. They sold jars for 5 times the normal price. River commerce collapsed. Cargo boats that transported grain, papyrus, pottery, fabrics remained anchored. Nobody navigated a river of blood. Merchants lost fortunes in perishable goods that rotted in the holds. Fishermen, a numerous class, that fed entire cities, lost their means of subsistence overnight. Priests of Hapi performed desperate rituals. They sacrificed white bulls, burned rare incense imported from Punt, sang hymns throughout entire nights. The river remained red. For the first time in 3,000 years of recorded Egyptian history, Hapi was not responding. 7 days later, at dawn of the 8th day, the water returned to normal. Egyptians ran to the river, filled jars, drank with relief. Pharaoh interpreted, it was a temporary phenomenon. It passed. Normal life returns. But it did not return. 24 hours later, the second plague began. Frogs came out of the Nile by the millions. Exodus chapter 8, verse 3, and the river shall bring forth frogs abundantly, which shall go up and come into your house, into your bedroom, on your bed, into the houses of your servants, on your people, into your ovens, and into your kneading bowls. It was not a few frogs invading gardens. It was an amphibian tsunami. They literally covered every available surface. You woke up with frogs on your face. You tried to get up and stepped on a living carpet that covered the entire floor of the room. You opened the door and a green wave jumped inside. You went to the kitchen to prepare food and found frogs inside the flower pots, inside the oil jars, inside the oven, still hot from the previous night. In the streets, layers of stacked frogs created obstacles 1/2 meter high. Chariots could not pass. Horses refused to walk because with each step they crushed dozens of frogs and slipped on the viscous liquid. Small children could not walk because the volume of jumping frogs knocked them down. The noise was the most disturbing part, continuous croaking amplified by millions of throats 24 hours a day. There was no silence. There was no rest. The sound penetrated mud walls, invaded temples, echoed in palaces. Old people went deaf. Children developed night terrors. Nobody slept more than 2 hours straight. And there was the spiritual aspect that terrified the Egyptians. Heket, the frog goddess, symbolized fertility and birth. Midwives used amulets with her image. Temples dedicated to her existed throughout the territory. Frogs were sacred, untouchable. Killing a frog was a punishable crime. And now, millions of the sacred creature invaded, destroyed, contaminated everything. Pharaoh called Moses and Aaron in desperation. Entreat the Lord that he may take away the frogs from me and from my people, and I will let the people go, that they may sacrifice to the Lord. Moses asked a specific question. Glory over me. When shall I entreat for you and for your servants and for your people to destroy the frogs from you and your houses, that they may remain in the river only? Pharaoh answered, tomorrow. Why not immediately? Perhaps Pharaoh still doubted. He wanted to test if Moses really controlled the phenomenon or if the frogs would leave naturally. But that choice cost another 24 hours of torment. The next day, Moses prayed, and all the frogs died at the same time. Exodus 8, verse 13. And the Lord did according to the word of Moses, and the frogs died out of the houses, out of the courtyards, and out of the fields. Imagine waking up and finding millions of frog corpses covering everything. Inside the house, outside the house, in the fields, in the streets, in the markets. They began rotting immediately under extreme heat. Verse 14 records, and they gathered them together in heaps, and the land stank. Men, women, children, slaves, all were mobilized to collect carcasses. They used shovels, rakes, baskets. They piled them in fetid mountains at the city limits. The work took weeks, and even after removing all visible frogs, decomposing corpses inside walls, under furniture, in rock cracks, continued exhaling stench for months. But as soon as it was possible to breathe without vomiting, Pharaoh broke his promise. Exodus 8, verse 15. But when Pharaoh saw that there was relief, He hardened his heart and did not heed them as the Lord had said. The plagues did not stop. The third came without warning. Aaron struck the dust of the earth with the staff, and all the dust became lice on man and beast. Exodus 8 verse 17 specifies, throughout all the land of Egypt. It was not just irritating itching. They were massive infestations that covered entire bodies. Lice entered ears, nose, mouth. Bite wounds became infected. Cattle, horses, donkeys, camels, dogs, cats, all covered. Animals rubbed against walls until bleeding, trying to relieve torment. War horses, pride of the Egyptian army, became useless because they could not bear harnesses, touching infested skin. Egyptians shaved hair completely. Men, women, children, all bald, trying to eliminate parasite. Nests. They washed bodies with natron, sodium carbonate used in mummification, which burned skin but killed lice. They burned clothes and bedding, destroying valuable belongings. Pharaoh's magicians tried to replicate the plague using their occult arts. They could not. For the first time, they failed completely. Exodus 8 verse 19 records their admission. Then the magicians said to Pharaoh, "This is the finger of God." It was public recognition that superior power was operating. It was not a trick that could be copied. It was not magic their incantations could reach. But Pharaoh hardened his heart even more. If his own occult specialists admitted defeat, he could not admit it. It would be recognizing impotence before the slaves. The fourth plague came 3 days later. Swarms. Exodus 8 verse 24. And there came a grievous swarm of flies into the house of Pharaoh, and into his servants' houses, and into all the land of Egypt. The land was corrupted by reason of the swarm of flies. They were not house flies. Scholars debate the exact identification. Possibly blowflies that lay eggs in meat, or stable flies that bite and suck blood, or mixed swarms of multiple species. But the result was unequivocal. Dense clouds that darkened the air, made breathing difficult, covered food instantly. Houses became uninhabitable. You could not eat without swallowing flies. You could not sleep because they landed on your face, entered your nose, mouth, ears. Open wounds from lice bites attracted flies that deposited larvae. Within 48 hours, myiasis began appearing. Worms eating living flesh from inside out. Markets closed completely. Impossible to sell any food. Flies contaminated everything in seconds. Temples suspended rituals because priests could not keep offerings clean long enough to present to the gods. Egyptian public life entered total collapse. And here, something happened that completely changed the dynamics of the plagues. God made territorial distinction. Exodus 8, verse 22. And in that day I will set apart the land of Goshen, in which my people dwell, that no swarms of flies shall be there. To the end you may know that I am the Lord in the midst of the land. The dividing line was visible. You could stand at the border between Goshen and Egyptian territory and see the difference with your own eyes. On one side, black clouds of flies making the air almost solid. On the other, clean sky, blue, without a single insect. Egyptians tried to migrate to Goshen, entire families fleeing infested cities, seeking refuge in Hebrew villages. But Egyptian authorities blocked. They would not allow free population to mix with slaves. So Egyptians watched from afar, with envy and growing terror, the Hebrews living normally while they suffocated in plagues. Pharaoh called Moses. First concession, go, sacrifice to your God in the land. He would permit worship, but not liberation. Moses refused. Hebrew sacrifices, lambs and oxen, were abominations to Egyptians who worshipped these animals. They would make the sacrifices in the wilderness, or Egyptians would stone them. Pharaoh yielded a bit more. I will let you go, that you may sacrifice to the Lord your God in the wilderness. Only you shall not go very far away. Moses prayed. The swarms disappeared. and Pharaoh went back again. The fifth plague struck the backbone of the Egyptian economy, pestilence on animals. Exodus 9 verse 3 lists those affected. Behold, the hand of the Lord is upon your cattle, which are in the field, on the horses, on the donkeys, on the camels, on the oxen, and on the sheep. A very severe pestilence. Death was not gradual. Verse 6, so the Lord did this thing on the next day, and all the livestock of Egypt died. 24 hours, every work, transport, food, commerce, animal, dead. Imagine the economic impact. Egypt possessed millions of head of cattle. Oxen plowed all agricultural fields of the Nile Valley. Without oxen, there was no plowing. Without plowing, there was no planting. Without planting, famine would come in months. Horses pulled war chariots and civilian transport. The Egyptian army depended on chariot divisions, 3,500 active chariots, each pulled by 2 horses. 7,000 war horses dead in one day. Donkeys transported goods in caravans. Internal trade depended on tens of thousands of donkeys crossing the desert carrying grains, fabrics, pottery, metals, all dead. Camels enabled long-distance trade through the Sinai to Asia, dead. Sheep provided wool, meat, sacrifices in the temples, dead. Within 48 hours, carcasses began rotting. There was no capacity to bury or burn such massive volume. Mountains of dead animals scattered across the fields. Vultures, jackals, and wild dogs fed until they could eat no more. The smell of decomposition added to the residual stench of dead frogs. But the most disturbing detail, Exodus 9 verse 6, but of the livestock of the children of Israel, not one died. Pharaoh sent messengers to Goshen to verify. They returned, confirming the Hebrew flocks grazed peacefully, healthy, no deaths. The distinction was impossible to ignore. Still, verse 7, but the heart of Pharaoh became hard, and he did not let the people go. The sixth plague was personal, boils. Moses received specific instruction. Take handfuls of ashes from a furnace and scatter them toward heaven in the presence of Pharaoh. Exodus 9, verse 10. And it became fine dust in all the land of Egypt, and it caused boils that break out in sores on man and beast. They were not pimples or skin irritation. They were open sores, bleeding, oozing pus. They concentrated especially in areas already wounded by lice. Secondary infections transformed small wounds into deep ulcers that exposed muscle and bone. Fever accompanied the lesions, people delirious with pain. Movement opened wounds again. Sleeping was impossible because any contact with surfaces caused unbearable pain. The magicians themselves, Jannes and Jambres, could not stand before Pharaoh. Exodus 9, verse 11. And the magicians could not stand before Moses, because of the boils, for the boils were on the magicians and on all the Egyptians. The healing specialists, masters of Egyptian medical arts, were incapacitated. Temples closed because priests could not perform purification rituals, being themselves impure with suppurating wounds. According to Egyptian religious law, priests with skin lesions could not enter sacred areas. With everyone afflicted, worship ceased. They tried all known ointments, honey and herb paste, beer and fermented bread poultices, bandages soaked in incense and myrrh. Nothing worked. The wounds would not heal, and there was no class distinction. Nobles in the palace, slaves in the fields, soldiers in the garrisons, all covered with ulcers that would not close. Then came something that had never happened in recorded Egypt. Hail. Moses gave advance warning this time. Exodus 9, verse 18. Behold, tomorrow about this time I will cause very heavy hail to rain down, such as has not been in Egypt since its founding until now. Egypt rarely saw rain. Annual precipitation in the Nile Valley, less than 25 millimeters, one of the driest climates on the planet. Hail was absolutely unprecedented in 3,000 years of recorded history, but something in Moses' tone made some Egyptians believe. Verse 20, "He who feared the word of the Lord among the servants of Pharaoh made his servants and his livestock flee into the houses." For the first time, Egyptians were obeying the command of Israel's God, not by accepting his authority, but by pure terror of what was coming. Those who did not believe left slaves and animals in the fields. The next morning, the sky darkened with clouds Egypt had never seen. Thunder rumbled, lightning cut through the sky, and blocks of ice began falling. Exodus 9, verses 23 and 24. And there was hail, and fire mingled with the hail, so very heavy that there was none like it in all the land of Egypt since it became a nation. It was not hail the size of marbles. Biblical testimony mentions weight sufficient to kill men and animals, destroy trees, devastate plantations, blocks the size of fists, possibly larger, falling at terminal velocities exceeding 160 kilometers per hour. Exposed people died in seconds, crushed skulls, broken bones. Slaves working in the fields were struck down where they stood. Animals that had not been gathered were massacred. Centuries-old trees, sycamores, date palms, acacias were uprooted or split in half. Mud houses with reed roofs collapsed under the weight of accumulated hail, and there was fire mingled with hail. Lightning descending continuously, striking trees, houses, fields. Fires started everywhere, but the hail kept falling, extinguishing some fires while lightning started others. It was unprecedented meteorological chaos. The crops were destroyed. Verse 31. Now the flax and the barley were struck, for the barley was in the head and the flax was in bud. Flax used to make fabrics for all Egypt, completely lost. Barley, base grain for making beer and bread, ready. For harvest, annihilated. Billions of spikes crushed on the ground. But verse 32, "But the wheat and the spelt were not struck, for they are late crops." The wheat plantations, which would mature weeks later, were still low enough to survive. It was as if God was calibrating destruction, enough to devastate, but not enough to cause immediate famine. There was still a chance to harvest wheat and avoid total hunger if Pharaoh would free the people now. And the contrast remained. Verse 26, "Only in the land of Goshen, where the children of Israel were, there was no hail." Pharaoh, seeing unprecedented destruction, called Moses in desperation. First admission of guilt. "I have sinned this time. The Lord is righteous and my people and I are wicked." He begged, "Entreat the Lord that there may be no more mighty thundering and hail, for it is enough. I will let you go, and you shall stay no longer." Moses stretched out his hands. The thunder ceased. The hail stopped, and the text records with inevitable sadness. Verse 34, "And when Pharaoh saw that the rain, the hail, and the thunder had ceased, he sinned yet more, and he hardened his heart, he and his servants. The eighth plague was deliberate famine, locusts. But before it came, something extraordinary happened. Pharaoh's servants, the officials who managed the empire, confronted the king openly. Exodus 10 verse 7. "Then Pharaoh's servants said to him, 'How long shall this man be a snare to us? Let the men go, that they may serve the Lord their God. Do you not yet know that Egypt is destroyed?'" It was administrative mutiny. For the first time in 3,000 years, Egyptian officials questioned Pharaoh publicly. The empire was collapsing, and they knew it. Economy destroyed, cattle and dead, fields devastated, population covered with wounds, and Pharaoh continued refusing the obvious solution. Pharaoh called Moses back. Negotiation. "Go, serve the Lord your God. Who are the ones that are going?" Moses responded, "We will go with our young and our old, With our sons and our daughters, with our flocks and our herds we will go, for we must hold a feast to the Lord." Pharaoh exploded, "The Lord had better be with you when I let you and your little ones go. Beware, for evil is ahead of you. Not so. Go now, you who are men, and serve the Lord, for that is what you desired." And he drove them out from his presence. It was an obvious trap. If only men went, they would leave families as hostages. They would return. Pharaoh knew it. Moses refused. Then came the locusts. Exodus 10, verses 14 and 15. "And the locusts went up over all the land of Egypt, for they covered the face of the whole earth, so that the land was darkened. And they ate every herb of the land, and all the fruit of the trees which the hail had left. So there remained nothing green on the trees or on the plants of the field throughout all the land of Egypt. Locust clouds, kilometers in extension, blocked the sun. The buzz of wings created continuous, deafening sound. When they landed, they devoured everything in minutes. Wheat that had survived the hail was consumed completely. Rye, vegetables in gardens, grapes on vines, figs on fig trees, everything disappeared. Trees were stripped bare, branches naked. Nothing green remained. No leaf, no sprout, no hope of harvest for the next months. Severe famine was now guaranteed. Pharaoh called Moses urgently, verses 16 and 17. Then Pharaoh called for Moses and Aaron in haste and said, "I have sinned against the Lord your God and against you. Now therefore please forgive my sin only this once, and entreat the Lord your God, that he may take away from me this death only." This death only. Pharaoh finally recognized he was facing lethal power. Moses prayed. A very strong east wind blew all day and all night. By morning, it had carried all the locusts to the Red Sea. Exodus 10, verse 19. Not one locust remained in all the territory of Egypt. And then the predictable pattern, "But the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he did not let the children of Israel go." 9 plagues. 9 wasted opportunities. And now came the penultimate one, which would attack not property or animals or plants, but the Egyptian psyche at the deepest level. Darkness. Exodus 10, verses 21 and 22. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand toward heaven, that there may be darkness over the land of Egypt, darkness which may even be felt." So Moses stretched out his hand toward heaven, and there was thick darkness in all the land of Egypt 3 days. It was not night. Night had stars, had moon when appropriate, had ambient luminosity. This was absolute darkness. Verse 23. They did not see one another, nor did anyone rise from his place for 3 days. 372 hours of complete darkness. You extended your hand centimeters from your face and could not see your own fingers. Torches would not light. Fires would not burn. The darkness suffocated fire as if it were physical substance, not absence of light. It was darkness, which may even be felt, Hebrew expression suggesting density, weight, tangible presence, as if darkness were an entity, not a vacuum. People described feeling pressed, enveloped, suffocated by something beyond lack of vision. For 3 days, all of Egypt was paralyzed. Nobody left home because they could not see even the hand in front of their face. There was no work, no commerce, no life. People sat in absolute darkness, terrified, waiting. Children cried invisible. Old people groaned without anyone seeing them. Families huddled together just to feel the presence of another human being, because in total darkness, even loneliness became existential terror, and the spiritual meaning was devastating. Ra, the sun god, was the supreme divinity of the Egyptian pantheon. Pharaoh was the son of Ra. All of Pharaoh's power derived from that connection. The sun rising each morning was daily proof that Ra reigned, that cosmic order Ma'at was maintained, that Egypt remained under divine protection. For 3 days, Ra disappeared completely. He did not rise. He did not traverse the sky in his solar bark. He did not exist, and no priest, no ritual, no offering could bring him back. But in the houses of the Hebrews in Goshen, there was light. Verse 23, but all the children of Israel had light in their dwellings. The distinction was brutal. You could stand at the border between Goshen and Egyptian territory and see two worlds. On one side, darkness that could be touched. On the other, normal daylight. As if God were saying, "You worship the sun god? Where is he now? Let me show you who controls the light." When the darkness finally dissipated, Egyptians emerged from houses pale, trembling, psychologically broken. 3 days of total sensory isolation leaves permanent marks. But Pharaoh, desperate and furious, called Moses one last time. Verse 24. Then Pharaoh called to Moses and said, "Go, serve the Lord. Only let your flocks and your herds be kept back. Let your little ones also go with you." He was conceding almost everything. Men, women, children could go. Only flocks would remain as guarantee of return. But Moses refused emphatically. Verse 26, "Our livestock also shall go with us. Not a hoof shall be left behind." Pharaoh exploded in uncontrolled fury. "Get away from me! Take heed to yourself and see my face no more, for in the day you see my face you shall die." Moses agreed calmly, "You have spoken well. I will never see your face again." But before leaving for the last time, he delivered the final message. The 10th plague was coming, and it would be qualitatively different from all the others. Because this time, it would not be animals dying, it would not be destruction of property, it would not be amplified natural phenomenon, it would be people, firstborn. Every Egyptian family from Pharaoh's house to the lowest dungeon would lose their oldest son, simultaneously, at exact midnight of a specific date. Exodus 11 verses 4 through 6. Then Moses said, "Thus says the Lord, about midnight I will go out into the midst of Egypt, and all the firstborn in the land of Egypt shall die, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who sits on his throne, even to the firstborn of the female servant who is behind the handmill, and all the firstborn of the animals. Then there shall be a great cry throughout all the land of Egypt, such as was not like it before, nor shall be like it again." Moses gave exact date and time. 14th of Nisan at midnight. Pharaoh expelled him from the palace with death threats. Moses gathered the elders of Israel, detailed instructions. Each family would kill a lamb without blemish, a male 1 year old. They would put the blood on the 2 doorposts and on the lintel using hyssop. They would roast the meat completely, nothing raw, nothing boiled in water. They would eat it with unleavened bread and bitter herbs, loins girded, sandals on feet, staff in hand, posture of those ready to depart immediately, and no one would leave home until morning, because at midnight the Lord would pass through the land. And where there was no blood on the door, the firstborn would die. There was no exception. Age, health, innocence did not matter. Firstborn human, firstborn animal, marked for death. The only protection was lamb's blood applied specifically as instructed. The night of the 14th of Nisan arrived. Hebrews killed lambs. Conservative estimate, 600,000 adult men represents at least 600,000 families. Probably more, because some large families subdivided. Exodus 12 allows small family to share lamb with neighbor, but minimum number, 600,000 lambs sacrificed in a few hours before sunset. Blood ran in the streets of Goshen. Each family roasted meat over fire, prepared unleavened bread, and waited. Egyptians slept restlessly. Some believed the warning and watched firstborn children all night, as if parental presence could prevent death. Others laughed nervously. They had seen 9 plagues come and go. They would survive the 10th as well. Pharaoh was in the palace, surrounded by elite guards, magicians, priests. Surely nothing would happen to his son. Midnight. Absolute silence for a moment that seemed suspended in time, and then the scream began. Exodus 12, verses 29 and 30. And it came to pass at midnight that the Lord struck all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who sat on his throne to the firstborn of the captive who was in the dungeon, and all the firstborn of livestock. So Pharaoh rose in the night, he, all his servants, and all the Egyptians, and there was a great cry in Egypt, for there was not a house where there was not one dead. It was not gradual disease that attacked the weakest first. It was not progressive epidemic giving time to react. It was instantaneous. Exact midnight, all Egyptian firstborn stopped breathing simultaneously. Pharaoh's son, the prisoner's son, the priest's son, the merchant's son, the soldier's son, the slave's son, all. Imagine the horror. You wake to screams from the entire neighborhood. You realize the loudest scream is coming from your own house. You run to your oldest son's room. He is lying there, eyes open but lifeless, no pulse, no breath. Body still warm but already dead. You shake him, scream his name, beg him to wake. Nothing. You go desperately into the street and see the same scene repeating in every house. Fathers carrying children's bodies, mothers tearing clothes in desperation, old people staggering in shock, wails of mourning rising from every city, every village, every house. There was not a single Egyptian residence without death. Families with multiple children lost the oldest. Families with one child lost everything. Firstborn varied in age, babies of months, children of years, teenagers, young adults, even some middle-aged men who were firstborn of elderly mothers. All dead at the same hour. And the animals, every firstborn of cattle, sheep, goat, donkey. The few animals that had survived the fifth plague, those gathered during the hail, now lost their firstborn. It was as if death was ensuring Egypt would lose complete capacity for recovery. Pharaoh, who had lost his own son and heir, sent for Moses in the middle of the night. He did not wait for morning. He did not maintain pride. Verses 31 and 32. Then he called for Moses and Aaron by night and said, "Rise, go out from among my people, both you and the children of Israel, and go, serve the Lord as you have said. Also take your flocks and your herds, as you have said, and be gone. And bless me also, and bless me also." The man who considered himself a god was begging blessing from the God he had defied for 9 months, and common Egyptians did something extraordinary. Exodus 12, verse 33. And the Egyptians urged the people that they might send them out of the land in haste, for they said, "We shall all be dead." They literally expelled the Hebrews. They gave gold, silver, clothes, anything for them to go away quickly. Verses 35 and 36. Now the children of Israel had done according to the word of Moses, and they had asked from the Egyptians articles of silver, articles of gold and clothing, and the Lord had given the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, so that they granted them what they requested. Thus they plundered the Egyptians. It was not theft. Egyptians threw riches at them. Take it and go. Just go. Absolute terror that if Hebrews remained, more plagues would come. And from the 10th plague, it was obvious the next would be even worse. 600,000 Hebrew men, plus women and children, plus a mixed multitude, Egyptians and others who decided to follow Israel's God after witnessing 9 months of judgment. Total estimate, 2 million to 2.5 million people. They took huge flocks, valuables, everything the Egyptians had given. Exodus 12, verse 37. Then the children of Israel journeyed from Ramesses to Succoth, about 600,000 men on foot, besides children. They left in a single night, in a single dawn, the largest population exodus the ancient world had seen, and they left behind a destroyed Egypt. collapsed economy, dead generation, devastated fields, decimated flocks, faith in God's fundamentally shaken, collective trauma that would mark the nation for centuries. How was it to live in Egypt during the plagues? It was waking each morning, not knowing if there would be water, food, light, or life. It was burying animals by the thousands. It was watching the economy crumble in real time. It was feeling wounds that would not heal. It was staying 372 hours in absolute darkness. It was hearing the screams of the entire neighborhood when children stopped breathing at the same time. And worst of all, it was knowing that each plague came after an ignored warning. Pharaoh received 9 opportunities to avoid the 10th. 9 times Moses said, "Let the people go." 9 times Pharaoh refused, and each refusal cost more blood, more hunger, more death. The Egyptians who survived the plagues carried the scars for the rest of their lives, ulcers that never healed completely, fields that took years to recover, memories of darkness and death that woke them in the middle of the night. But the deepest scar was spiritual. They saw their gods humiliated one by one. Hapi, god of the Nile, did not stop the blood. Heket, frog goddess, did not control the invasion. Ra, sun god, could not pierce through the darkness. And no priest, no sorcerer, no pharaoh could stop the God of Israel. Witnessing judgment changes who you are. The Egyptians learned that there is something worse than suffering consequences. It is suffering consequences after having had 8 warnings.